Well, I think that image says it all, Rick. We're here on a Tuesday, so welcome everybody in. That's Riku Mukherjee. I'm Tony Altieri. Welcome into the 5 of 6 podcast. I was all fired up. You and I both hit winners at Hovland at the Memorial. We're getting ready for the U.S. Open. The Canadian Open. It's a national event. It's not the best field, but like always, excited to talk all these things. And then the golf world was turned upside down by the news this morning. And we all found out apparently the same way that basically everyone who works for LIV, everyone works for the PGA Tour, all the players, everyone found out at the same time when the news was broken on social media. I think CNN ran the story. It was all over Twitter that LIV, the DP Tour, and the PGA are in the process of becoming one entity, one global golf entity. And that's all anybody wants to talk about. So I'm curious from you, with all of that background, how has your day been and how has this all been, I guess, digesting and marinating over the course of, let's call it 12 hours since we all kind of found out about this?
Well, I guess the story broke about 7 a.m. about East Coast time, I guess, or no,
West Coast time, I think.
West Coast time, 7 a.m. I woke up at 8 a.m. this morning and had over 100 messages on my phone. And
yeah,
at first I thought it was when I get that many messages before I even wake up, I'm like, oh my God, who died? That's my first thought. And then I was like, okay, I started reading through it and I was like, okay. Seems to be a story about LIV and PGA merging, and I was like, "This is a joke." I didn't realize that it was a serious thing until I actually opened up the stuff and I read that it was real. It looked like it was a story on CNN, CNBC, and all that stuff. And yeah, I mean, I literally spent the first half an hour after waking up just reading all these stories, reading all these tweets and stuff like that, and I was pretty shocked. That was my first initial response was pure and utter shock. I didn't think that I can't say that I didn't think something like this would happen. I just didn't think something like this would happen this soon. It was basically the 1 year anniversary since LIV's first event, their inaugural event last year, and basically 1 year of LIV, and looks like Jay Monahan has basically flip-flopped and made some sort of backroom deal with Yasir, whatever his name is, the CEO of Saudi Arabia Golf, or whatever his title is. But it doesn't sound like many people knew about this. Like you said, all the players and people that this affects the most found out through Twitter, and at the same time as we all did as fans. And yeah, I feel kind of bad for them. It just seems like they pulled a little shady backdoor deal that benefits them and benefits Jay Monahan himself and Saudi Arabia PIF Golf themselves, and maybe eventually it'll benefit the players and stuff like that. But right now, it seems like a very slimy kind of deal, and it looks like any player that didn't take LIV money and stayed true to the PGA Tour got a pretty raw deal, and a bad situation there, especially the likes of Rory and Rahm and the faces of the PGA Tour that have defended the PGA Tour and talk so bad about LIV for the last couple of years, and them not taking the money and having to deal with this and deal with questions over and over for the last couple of years. And it just seems like I feel really bad for them. That's all I can really say is for those guys, even though they are obviously very wealthy and the money is not the most important thing to them, but just what they've had to deal with for the last couple of years, especially Rory, who is basically the face of the PGA, has been pretty brutal for the last couple of years, and I just feel kind of bad for them.
So I want to unpack this from a couple different perspectives with you, because I think initially there's a couple things here. So one is there's the business side of things, right? Which is the fact that the PGA Tour, the DP World Tour, and the LIV Tour are now in talks to become one global entity that'll kind of govern professional golf and work together and share athletes and all these things. So there's the business side of it, right? And the fact that Jay Monahan, to your point, who had been staunchly anti-LIV, he saw it as an absolute threat to the PGA brand and everything that had been built, and was very outspoken and had players, to your point, outspoken against LIV as well, seemed to have been orchestrating this deal, according to him, for months now. I mean, 6-7 months he's been working on this with people. But the fact that there were never any leaks, there were never any talks, there was never any inclination, no one within the PGA seemed to have any knowledge, and those that you would think, especially those guys, Cantlay, Rory, Malnati, that sit on the board of directors that represent the players, all of them had no idea that this was happening, or at least that's what they've said publicly. It makes it feel very slapdash. So there's the business side of it, but then there's also the way that it comes off, right? To your point, the fact that folks had been saying on the PGA Tour just how detrimental LIV was, that it was basically an abomination of the game, and the guys that had gone there were terrible people, and how could they take this blood money, and the references to the implications that the Saudis were involved in 9/11, and then somehow these guys were in taking this money, they were complicit in everything that Saudi Arabia was complicit in. So there's the feeling of it, right? So there's all these perspectives. And what I wanted to do was think of it about in real terms, like winners and losers, which you started to walk down through. Like, who are the guys who really benefits from this? Who are the real winners and losers of all of this coming together? And I kind of wrote down a short list. I'm curious to get your perspective on that. So the first one that I think is a win, and I think it's a clear win, because when we talked about when the league separated, those that were probably impacted the most negatively were the fans, right? Because we weren't going to see on a weekly basis Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka compete against Rory McIlroy and Jon Rahm. And so you took a good portion of what I would call the top end of the PGA Tour, and they became part of LIV, and they were off doing their own thing. In limbo, really. I mean, because nobody was watching these events. But so the fans suffered. So it feels, just from the aspect of having these guys back in fields and competing, that the fans are going to win, because now all three of these leagues are going to collaborate, work together, and potentially share athletes. So from that perspective, just the perspective of getting those guys potentially back on tour, do you feel like it's a clear win for the fans?
Yes, I think at least for the majority of fans, there's obviously going to be some people that like LIV. They liked watching LIV and their formats and how they ran things. But I would say for the majority of fans, it's a win. I was pretty disappointed when when the league separated and LIV formed, because I like you said, I liked watching the best players in the world play against each other, and week in and week out. And it was really annoying and sad for the last year how the only time we got to see the best players in the world play together were at the majors. And I get it. The majors are the most important things, and the 4 times a year where you have a major championship, they're the most important events of the year. And it was important to have all the best players playing at those events. But people like me and you, and people that watch the PGA Tour week in, week out, we were losing a lot with that, I guess, first and second tier of golfers that we were missing. Like you said, Brooks, DJ, Bryson, Patrick Reed, like these names that we were not getting to see week in and week out compete against the likes of Rory, Rahm, Scheffler, Morikawa, Patrick Cantlay, Xander Schauffele. Like, we didn't get to see all these guys play week in and week out against each other, and it sucked. And I, as someone who gambles on golf, as someone who plays DFS on golf, where there was these, I don't want to make this about a DFS thing, but there was big gaps in DFS value that we were lacking when, which we would get in majors, soft pricing, as we would say. But yeah, I think I agree with you. I think the number one win for the majority part is the fans now, when this actually all comes together. Like, obviously we haven't gotten much details yet. We don't know how the schedule is going to be. We don't know how the format's going to be. We don't know any of those major details of what the golf season next year is going to look like. or maybe even this fall. I don't really know when things are going to change, but I'm pretty sure the product that they're going to put together is going to be a good one. I think it's going to be something that we're going to enjoy every single week, and we're going to continue to do shows every week and talk about it every week. And it's going to be nice to be able to talk about a field with these guys every week again. And it's some of these guys that we love, and like we talked about before, the majority of the guys that that LIV took away from the PGA, which made it so amazing, were the villains: Phil, Brooks, Patrick Reed, Bryson. Like, these guys we love to hate. Like, we love to hate these guys, and we love it when they're playing on the PGA Tour against the nice guys, Rahm, Rory, Scheffler, these guys. So it's going to be nice to have them back together. I agree. I wholeheartedly agree that it's a win for the fans. And I get your take on this. I think the second winner here is LIV. It's Saudi Arabia. I think they won this this battle, whatever it was. I think at the end of the day, they created this LIV Golf League, and they didn't do it in the sense of trying to create a profit. Like, I think they knew that when they did it, they weren't going to make a profit. They wanted to just get their name out there. They wanted to show the world that Saudi Arabia was a country that you can go visit, tourists, and it's an amazing country for people to come visit. And they had beautiful things to show, and all that stuff, beautiful golf courses that you can go play and stuff like that. And I think that was their primary goal. And I think they were possibly failing in it a little bit, just because no one was really watching LIV. I mean, their numbers were there maybe a little bit, but they weren't getting the audience like the PGA Tour gets in and week out. And that's probably because it's a brand new league. People don't really know much about it and stuff like that. So they weren't getting the audience and or whatever. So I think a combination of that mixed with the PGA Tour potentially needing more money, I think, to be able to pay out these big purses and all that stuff. And I'm not gonna say that they needed money, but it doesn't help. It doesn't hurt for them to have a guy come in and fund this whole golf world situation with $2 billion and give Jay Monahan this much money to be able to put on this league next year, and the prize purses are going to go up and stuff like that. And the most important thing for Saudi Arabia in this situation was they're going to be the main corporate sponsor in an American company that we're going to see on American television week in and week out starting next year with the next season. So I think it's a big win for them. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that to your point, the goal for those in the PIF was never to establish a league that would surpass or usurp the PGA, right? Like that's just not going to happen. So I think they made a valiant effort before they started LIV to go and purchase the PGA in some form or fashion, but it being a nonprofit organization that made it almost impossible for them to do. When you have organizations like that, you can't go out and then buy that organization, right? The organization basically can take money from people and use that for the philanthropic needs that they have, and so the ability for the Saudis to do that didn't exist. So when that kind of never materialized, they're like, well, we're going to go out and start our own thing. And so I think the merger is a huge win for those in the PIF for all the points that you brought up. But I also think that it definitely, to echo kind of what you were saying, legitimizes what they were trying to do. It says that you can have a brand of golf that is different, that is exciting, that takes unique perspectives and new ideas, the team aspect, the shotgun start, all of those things. Like you can take what is an established brand in the PGA Tour and professional golf, turn it on its head, and it can be successful. It can garner, an audience. It can do these things. Ultimately, I agree with you. I didn't really see LIV sticking around much longer than a couple more years. Because I never saw it being profitable. The fact that they couldn't get a network deal done, they basically had to buy ad time on the CW. It just kind of backs up that point even further. So I think the PIF is a big winner in this because the PGA basically waved the white flag and said, okay, look, we don't want to compete. Let's use your money. Let's create something globally. And it opened that door. So I think absolutely the PIF won. The other big winner, I think, in this, who's ultimately Probably the ones that I think I'll get into the guy who I think is the biggest winner, who's also the biggest.
Phil Mickelson.
Well, I mean, so this kind of dovetails the next big set of winners in all of this is all the guys that left.
Yeah.
It's all the guys that left. They took the vitriol. They took all of the criticism. They were called all the names. They had to answer all of these questions in press conferences for a year. They were blackballed, all of these things. But they took the money. They took all of the downside with it, and now they are going to be welcomed back with open arms by the PGA. The tour players, the core guys within the tour, never hated the guys that left and went to LIV. That was something that was fictitious, that was painted by a number of people in the media. So these guys get to come back. They come back with all the money. And to your point, Phil's a huge winner. But to me, I look at the next layer of guys, and I was talking with, TK, who's a big fan of the show and all this. The guys to me that really won, Brendan Steele, Trey Mullinax, Pat Perez, Kevin Na, these guys that were never going to be superstars on the PGA Tour. They were good players, and they would probably have had really nice careers, and they would have ended up being millionaires anyways. They made more in 1 year of LIV than they had made in their entire careers on the PGA. Yep. And so those guys, to me, are hands down the biggest winners in all of this, because not only do they get the money, they get to come back and continue doing what they love to do on the biggest stage.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And in the same respect, I think the biggest losers in this situation is that second tier of golfers on the PGA Tour. Not the Rahms, not the Rorys, not the Schefflers. These guys have buku money. I mean, yes, at the end of the day, Rory McIlroy or Jon Rahm getting $400 million to go to LIV. Yes, that is life-changing money. I'm not going to lie about that. But Jon Rahm is going to be fine. Rory McIlroy is going to be fine. Like they have life-changing money. They have generational wealth that taking that money is not the end of the world. Tiger Woods getting $800 million offered to him to go to LIV and turning it down. He is a billionaire. He doesn't really care about that. He cares more about his legacy and that stuff going forward. I think the biggest losers are here is that second tier of golfers that decided not to go. The Fleetwoods, the Hattons, the Justin Roses, the Adam Scotts, like these guys that have made a good living on the PGA Tour, but they were going to make generational wealth going to the LIV Tour. And they turned down that opportunity to continue to play on what they believed was the better tour, the tour that you can continue to make your legacy and all that stuff. And, it didn't hurt the fact that this year we had these designated events where the prize purses and the total purses were going up, and they knew that they were going to start making more money playing golf. So that didn't hurt the situation, but the amount of money that let's just take the best example that I can think of is in this entire situation is Will Zalatoris.
Yeah, the guy, hands down.
The guy was going to make $100 million going to LIV Golf, which he turned down because he believed in the product of the PGA Tour. He believed in the elder statesmen above him, that what they were telling him, Rory, Rahm, Jay Monahan, like what these guys, Tiger Woods, were telling him to stay with the PGA Tour. He missed out on that payday. And I'm not saying that Will Zalatoris is not going to make $100 million in his life, but he missed that on that payday in a short amount of time that he could have made, and then continued to make money when this merger happened to come back to the PGA Tour. So yes, the biggest winners are those second tier of golfers that went over to LIV. Like you said, the Brendan Steeles, the Harold Varners, the Kevin Nas, like these guys that were going to make millions of dollars playing on the PGA Tour because of their skill in the game of golf, but they got that generational wealth. They got that big payday, and now they get to come back. Yes, they're going to have to pay a small fine to come back to the PGA Tour, which is going to be nothing for them, and they're going to continue to earn money, even more money, because it seems like the purses are going to go up even more next year. So those guys are absolutely the biggest winners.
Yeah, the other group that I'll kind of throw in here that I think is worth at least acknowledging when you talk about losers, right? Like the people that lost in this. There are a number of people in and around like golf media, the golf world, that work for the PGA that were staunchly, I mean, almost to the point of political, religious, like anti-live, and continued to be up until, I mean, basically when the moments when the words were dropped right at 7 o'clock this morning, the Brandel Chambleys, the Jimmy Dunes, like those people like that. That I mean, the talking heads, they were basically paid service announcements for the PGA Tour. And again, I don't besmirch or behold anything against them, but what I would say is they look like total ass clowns. They look like total idiots. And to your point, in a smaller perspective, Rory's the other guy that looks like he's an idiot. Tiger Woods, in a smaller, very smaller way, it's embarrassing to him as well. Like
Yep.
those are the guys to me that, at least from a perspective, right? Like their perspective, excuse me, where their microphone, like in the PGA microcosm, like they lost a lot in all of this.
Yeah, I agree with that. Rory, his situation is interesting because yes, he had to take the brunt of a lot of live questions over the last couple of years, and he had to continually speak positively about the PGA Tour because he really did believe what Jay Monahan was spitting to him and what was telling him. And I think like he was basically the voice of Jay Monahan for the last 2 years, talking about how much better the tour is going to be, how little respect he had for the live tour and all that stuff. So I do feel bad for him. But he's the type of name, he's the type of guy that his aura and his place in the game, like he's one of the best golfers of all time, and he's the face of like golf for many years and for many kids that are trying to play golf. Um, he's the guy that can take it all. I think he was okay with taking all the questions. Through it all, he still played good golf. He's still, the third best player, world golfing rank wise. He's still the third best player in the world, having to deal with all this off the course stuff and stuff like that. So he did a really good job. I know, I understand what you're saying. Like all the stuff that he said was, idiotic or whatever, but it really was the voice of Jay Monahan. He's the big idiot in the situation. He basically like flip-flopped on everything he said 1 year ago. He said that this league is Saudi backed. It has connections to 9/11, all that stuff, and the morals are bad. And he had such little respect for the league. He couldn't even call it the Live Golf League. He had to call it the Saudi backed golf league or whatever. He's the big hypocrite in the situation because today he's saying stuff like, oh, I made all those comments with all the information I had at the time and blah 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 blah. But I'm sorry, like he didn't know at the time that this league was backed by a country that was possibly involved in 9/11 and killed an American journalist and all this other stuff that Saudi Arabia is known for, the bad stuff. I'm sorry, but like all of a sudden he doesn't know that stuff. Like that stuff is just like not important to him. I think it's wild to think that this guy is now basically the CEO of golf, world golf. And I honestly, we were talking about it in our text chain, like from what I've heard or from what I've read on Twitter from this players meeting earlier today, there was some heated conversations. Golfers called him a hypocrite. There was standing ovation when people talked about needing new leadership on the PGA Tour. I don't know, man. Like, I don't know if they can force him out. Like, I don't know if that's possible, like to force him out of his job, but these players could strike. I mean, they could strike until Jay Monahan is fired or removed from a board seat or something and replaced by someone. I wouldn't say that there's a non-zero chance of that happening. What do you think?
I mean, so here's the thing, and I this is something that I put in the text string as well too with our big group that was discussing this. Is typically strikes are related to collective bargaining agreements between athletes and ownership, right? And in this scenario, you miss the dynamic of ownership. For all intents and purposes, Jay Monahan is the league, but he's not ownership, right? Like the league is this entity that exists and it's technically run by the players. And I think what we found today is that the technicality is that it wasn't. Now with the formation of
they're employees now.
Yeah,
they're
so
employees now. Yeah,
basically what happens, and again, there's a lot that needs to be solved legally and through the business side of things that need to be put together, and that's going to take some time. But if everything falls into place the way that at least it's been laid out, basically there'll be an entity by which all of these tours now are part of, right? So all the assets, all the athletes, they're all now employees. They're owned by this global entity that Jay Monahan now sits atop. And so I think when you talk about like, losers in this, the players really, they lose because any semblance of control that they had over Jay Monahan, over the PGA Tour, any of those things, it's evaporated now. Like that's all gone. And so the best thing that they could do would be to come together to take the players organization and then to basically unionize like baseball, like basketball, like football, form a players union, have their own representation, and then be able to basically go to the table with the league, this entity that's being formed, and fight for pay, rights, all of these things. That's going to have to be established now. So I do think that there's going to be some massive changes within that. And getting back to your point about trying to remove him, like the way that it works, and again, I by no means am an expert of the hierarchy of how the PGA Tour is structured, but there's a board of directors that runs the PGA Tour, and Jay Monahan is the chair of that board and a commissioner. But the board can vote to remove him basically if they feel like he's done something that is negative. The issue is that in forming this new entity with the PIF, he's placed himself as the head of this entity that will now sit atop the PGA Tour. So if for some reason they decide to get rid of him, the PGA Tour does, he still sits on top of this entity that will own the PGA Tour. Now, if they wanted to, let's say they strike and they remove him from power and they put somebody in place, and whoever that person is decides, hey, we're not going through with this. Like we're not going to move forward with this. That will open up a whole new level of legal battles between the PIF, this entity that's basically in the ingredient stage of being baked, and the PGA. Yes, the PIF, the PGA, and this new entity. So that's one thing that they're going to have to consider is if they do get rid of him, it's you could have massive upheaval and unbelievable court cases, and they were getting ready to launch into that. And that kind of brings me full circle into the second thing is, as kind of the days unfolded and people have been talking more and more about this, what's been brought up on social media and then in the media in general is the fact that they were getting ready to go into court to start battling this out. The LIV PIF group and the PGA's representation. And it's been speculated pretty widely that there were things on both sides that both sets of lawyers came to the table and said, look, you do not want us to put this out there. You need to back down. You need to get rid of this thing. You need to make this go away, or else we are going to make this public as a part of the court case and the battle and everything that's going to ensue in the courts for the next probably 5 years as we go through this. And one of those things that's been thrown out as potential is that there were some things that were found about the PGA status as basically a charity, a 501c charity. Yeah. And that the PIF had discovered that they had run afoul for years, decades, of the rules that govern how charities work, how that money's paid out, how it's done through accounting fraud and things like that, that could have basically brought down the PGA if it was brought to light. Right. And that may have had an impact on what Jay Monahan ultimately had done. And again, this is speculation, but it is something to consider that whether it was that or something else, that this may have been hastened along because people did not want certain things to come out that had been discovered by the other side.
Interesting. I hadn't heard that, but yeah, to think about that is very interesting. Mike made a comment here. He said, golfers don't strike me as the type of athletes that will strike. Many of them don't make elite money. They need to put food on the table. There's no way they strike. I agree. We don't know exactly what the structure of the payments are going to be. I guess the prize money that these golfers can make moving forward. But though, from what it sounds like, they're going to go up. They're going to have the ability to make more money, to put more food on the table for them, for their families, and stuff like that, and be able to earn more money. Do you think, Tony, that there's going to be? I mean, this may never ever come to light. We don't know, but it may. I don't know. But do you think these guys that turn down the live money, let's just say Will Zalatoris, Rahm, these big names that turned down live money and decided to stay with the PGA Tour, do you think that to appease them, they're going to get compensated with substantial money in the future? Maybe not, maybe not the 100 million that was promised to Will Zalatoris for going to live, but since this is going to be a lot of Saudi money in the PGA Tour now, which is basically an endless amount of money, do you think they pull him to the side and say, hey, man, look, we know you got a raw deal out of this. We know you were offered this amount of money, but we're willing to give you, I guess reparations is the word. 40 reparations is the word. I mean, I guess, but $40 million in reparations to make you happy and continue to, do what you do to grow the game of golf, to do what you do to say the positive things about the PGA Tour or whatever it's going to be called moving forward in the future. Do you think these top names, even though the next level names like Fleetwood, Adam Scott, Hatton, like these guys, do you think they're going to get compensated with a substantial amount of money?
So I think there will. And if they were smart, they would look at what other companies who have come in and done things like this, I wouldn't necessarily say hostile takeovers, but when you've seen ownership change hands, the right way to do it is, and again, I'm not sure how this gets structured in this new entity and any of those kinds of things, would be to basically give the elite athletes and every athlete a stake in the league, right? So if you think about it like a company, think of it like shares in a company, right? Like when you have guys that are C-level employees at huge multinational companies, they don't get salaries. They get basically shares in the company. And the company does, that's how much they get compensated, right? They don't collect a salary. I think in some form or fashion, you're going to have to give the Jon Rahms, the Rorys, the Tiger Woodses, you're going to have to give those guys a significant stake in the future of that entity. And as that entity grows, they see, to your point, money coming back to them because of their quote unquote sacrifice or backing of the league. And the other side of that coin is the live guys. All of these guys who went over there, they got tons of money, but they also are captains and owners of teams and franchises. And they were promised valuations. And as the teams grew, that they would see considerable monies for this. So what happens to the Dustin Johnsons and the Brooks Koepkas and the Graham McDowells who are owners of these teams that now may evaporate overnight? Like, do they get the money that they were promised for the valuations on these teams? Hundreds of millions of dollars. We saw, people speculating that Nike was getting ready to buy Brooks's team for $2 billion, right? Like, are those guys going to realize any money from the PIF, from the PGA for these team valuations? Because I tend to believe what's going to happen eventually with LIV is it's just going to go away, right? Like basically what they're going to do is the whole brand was set up to compete and cause disruption. That's what Greg Norman was put there to do. And now that they no longer need to do that, the PF doesn't need to create this disruption and attention. LIV can just go away. Like all of that stuff, the shotgun starts, the teams, like all that BS can just no longer exist. And they can go back to playing regular PGA Tour golf or DP World Tour golf, whatever it is they prefer to play. And I just speculate that that's what's going to happen, is that no one, the LIV is not going to exist anymore. That brand is going to disappear. No one's going to talk about that. And it'll just be whatever they call the entity, PGA, World Tour, whatever. But I do think that in both cases, the guys from LIV who had ownership in these teams and the guys who stayed and became basically the face of the franchise for the PGA and backed what Jay Monahan was saying, they're going to have to give those guys some form of payment ownership in this new creation, this new league.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I like what you're saying there. I think I disagree with the fact that I think Liv's going to be completely gone. I don't think that. I think, and this is all me guessing here.
Yeah.
You know,
It's all speculation at this
yeah,
point because we don't know. Yeah, none of us know.
we don't have the details yet, but I think the way I think the way golf is going to look. Let's just say 1 year from now, June of 2024. I think the way it's going to look is it's going to be about 80% PGA Tour and about 20% live. What I mean by that is I think for the majority, you're right. I think it's going to be just PGA Tour events that we see every single week. The big events at Waste Management, Memorial, like these big events. We're going to see the four majors as we usually do 4 times a year. But I do think we're going to see a little bit of live influence into the league. I think we're going to get. They even said it in the statement today. Like there's going to be some sort of team concept. I think whether that is. I don't think there's going to be a team situation every week like there is in live with a team concept and a team winning every single week. I don't think that's going to be the situation, but I could see them having more team events throughout the year. Maybe not something dumb like the Zurich Classic or whatever, but like I don't know, like PGA teams like Team Callaway versus the Four Aces or something like that, like Dustin Johnson's team or whatever the situation is. Like I think they're gonna have team competition throughout the year. I don't think it's going to be every week. I think maybe like 3 or 4 events a year will be team competitions, and maybe like a finale team competition at the end of the year, at the end of the season, or whatever it is. So I think that's going to be there. That's pretty much guaranteed to be there because they pretty much said that in the statement today. And then maybe like some other little things like I know it sounds silly, but it really is important to these PGA Tour players that I think they're going to be allowed to wear shorts. Like I really think that it's important to these guys because as much as like we like the fact that golf is a classical game and these guys wear pants and all that stuff, it's kind of nice. It would be nice for these guys to be able to wear shorts during professional tournaments. Like,
yeah, they're playing in Arizona, Florida, Texas, like the Northeast, where it's like humid and hot. Like,
exactly,
dude, put on a pair of shorts. Who cares?
Yeah,
it's sports.
Let them wear shorts. I mean, the ladies are allowed to wear shorts. They wear skirts, and I don't see why they would not be allowed to wear shorts. Anyways, things like that, little things like that. I don't think we're gonna ever get to a 54-hole no cut event. I don't think that's ever going to be a situation. I think it's going to be. I think it's going to continue to be 72 holes. There will be some no cut events throughout the year. I think there will be majority will be cut events because I think the cut is very, very important in golf. They might make it a situation where if you don't make the cut, you still get a check. If you just make the tournament, something like that. The one thing that I'm not sure about is the shotgun start. Do you think we're ever? I don't think we'll get a week to week, but do you think we'll ever get maybe a couple events a year where we'll get a shotgun start?
I mean, me personally, I like the shotgun start.
I don't mind it.
I know you're not a fan of it, but to me, think about it this way, right? Like, what happens when you're the leader on Saturday, Sunday? You're the last guy to go off, and more often than not, those are the worst conditions. The course has been beat up and walked through by everybody. Typically, the wind is the worst. It's getting dark. Like, the guy who is playing the best has to play in the worst conditions. And that to me is a fundamental flaw in the way the game is set up. It should be fair for everybody as much as possible. And so I like the aspect of the shotgun start. You still get the leaders going off on one who get to play the course in the routing as it's designed. Right. And so you also get real-time shift in the leaderboard, which I enjoy very much as well too. So I'm pro shotgun start on the PGA Tour. I like it. It shortens the events.
Yeah, I think that the events that have like 70-man fields and like the limited field events might end up being shotgun starts. But obviously with like 156-man field, you can't do a shotgun start. You need to have waves and split tees for that. That doesn't logically, it doesn't make sense.
You could go. you could go just like we're traditionally doing Thursday and Friday, and then go shotgun on the weekends, where everybody tees off Saturday, Sunday at the same time, and leaderboards are changing dynamically. It's a point that you brought up, but I did want to make a comment about the team aspect. I have a tendency to believe, and it's something that they tried to manufacture with the teams, right? Like Team Four Aces and the whatever the Majestics and all these other the cliques, whatever, right? Like they tried to manufacture what exists like in racing with F1 factory teams, those kinds of things. And what they lacked was the sponsors to be able to do that. So they created these fictitious teams that everybody's a part of. But I could see using, some of the examples that you gave where you have teams of a dozen, 18, 20 guys that are factory team Callaway, factory team TaylorMade, factory team Titleist. And then you have guys that are, for all intents and purposes, to steal a term from racing, privateers, guys who are not part of a factory team, but all their gear, their equipment, it's all sponsored by them. Like all the guys maybe wear Link Soul or whatever. But I think you could end up with basically 10 major teams like we see in F1 racing, like we see in NASCAR, like we see in motocross, where it's sponsored by a major manufacturer. They have their core group of guys, and then there's your Brendan Steeles and Brendan Todds and those guys of the world who are sponsored, but they're not part of the factory team, right? And they're maybe if they have a great year, the factory team adds them and they become part of Team TaylorMade or part of Team Titleist, right? And that's how things will shift. But I think that's the model that we're now probably going to move towards, is where these major OEMs will have factory teams with guys that play nothing but their equipment, right? And that'll end up what happening. Like Team TaylorMade will be like Rory and Morikawa and Dustin Johnson and Tiger, you know what I mean? And Team Titleist is, Justin Thomas. And, so you'll have these big manufacturers now that will have teams that will compete for team titles, but really just like in racing, nobody really cares, right? Everybody cares about the golfers. So as the golfers change from one manufacturer to another manufacturer, the fans will go with them. And I think that's probably the best way to structure the team aspect. And ultimately, that's where the most money is generated, when they set the leagues and the teams up that way.
Yeah, I can definitely see something like that happening. The other thing, to get back to, we were talking about earlier, winners and losers. I wanted to get your take on this. Let's talk about the majors. 4 majors a year: Masters, US Open, British Open, and PGA. They got to be the winners here, right?
100%.
Like in this situation, they win big time here, because I think that they have never swayed a certain way over the last 4 years. They've always said, I think the Masters is like the lead, the head of the majors, basically. They've basically said that if you're able to qualify for the Masters, you can play. We don't care what tour you play on, whatever. Yeah. They've had a bipartisan, neutral Switzerland kind of feel for this competitive competition between two leagues over the last couple of years. And then same thing, like the other majors have basically fallen suit. So I think in this situation, they won pretty big, because they don't get looked down upon. The importance of the majors just gets elevated even more now. I just wanted to get your take on that also.
Yeah, I mean, I think they did a good job this year and last year of navigating through the dynamics, right? By saying, basically, to your point, we don't care if you qualify, you're in, right? So whatever we've deemed as the necessary requirements to qualify to get into this, if you've met those, you're in. We don't care what you have going on. And I think that's a great way that, to your point, that they've stayed neutral in all of this. And I think that now that everybody's basically going to come together and play in the same sandbox, they don't have to make any of these statements. They don't have to do weird concessions. They don't have to worry about, well, this guy won this major, and are we going to allow him to compete? Right. So by staying out of the argument the last couple of years, it's, to your point, solidified. They're the winners in this. Probably
but they were getting close to the point where they're going to start losing some of those golfers, like the Gooch. This has been a topic for the last couple months, is how Taylor Gooch is not in the U.S. Open, which is next week at LACC. Yes, he's not going to be able to play this year, but he'll be back in it next year.
He'll be able to qualify and play next year.
Yeah. So, but not qualify in like a U.S. Open qualify. He'll be able to play on the tour and be able to qualify basically.
Yep.
With OWGR points. And so like they were getting close to the brink where these guys, these middle tier golfers like Joaquin Niemann, Mito Pereira, like Kevin Na, Harold Varner, like these guys weren't going to be able to play in the majors anymore. So now the fact that they are back as a unified group now, those guys are going to be able to play in the majors, and they don't have to worry about that anymore. These guys are going to be able to play in the majors and, not have to worry about OWGR points and being able to qualify for majors and stuff like that, because they will be in the majors moving forward. And in that same umbrella with the majors, I think the big winner here also is the Ryder Cup and the President's Cup. They get these guys back. Like we were talking. This year's a Ryder Cup. We were in the Ryder Cup. We were talking about the likes of like Wyndham Clark and Keegan Bradley and these guys playing in it. But now that we get Brooks and DJ back, like we don't have to worry about these middle tier golfers playing in the Ryder Cup this year.
Yeah, no, these all of these events that kind of exist outside of the PGA Tour, outside of the DP World Tour, like they were kind of left in limbo. And to your point, like they're all going to get the opportunity to basically welcome everybody to play, right?
Yeah.
And I really do think, and this is kind of the, we can continue to talk, but like for me, like the biggest winner and the biggest loser in this is Jay Monahan. Jay Monahan is the guy that wins the biggest because he's basically solidified himself, to your point, as the global CEO of professional golf moving forward if all of this comes together.
And his bank account.
Yeah, he's going to make an ungodly amount of money.
Yeah, he puts Roger Goodell to shame now.
Yeah, and he also now in the move in creating this entity that sits above the PGA Tour, like we talked about, he now controls everything. It all comes and filters up to him. Yes, the board of directors still remained intact for the PGA Tour, but they've yet to establish the hierarchy for what will be this new entity that sits above it. And if the PIF, who is the main funder behind this, decides Jay's our guy, he's the leader of our company, our CEO, there's nothing that anybody can do to remove him from that. So major winner on all of those pieces, but he's also the major loser in that he's alienated everybody on LIV. So all of the players, all of the people there hate him. He was in the process of basically losing all of the support he had on the PGA Tour, and then fundamentally did that today. All the players, everybody, because he turned his back on them. Yep. He lost everybody on the PGA Tour, most of his staffers, everyone. And he is now seen, to your point, as the biggest fraud, sham, flip-flopper, hypocrite in the history of the game of golf. And so it's what should be good, I guess, from the fact that now we're going to have everybody back together and this is all going to work and these leagues are going to, talk and we're going to get everybody playing back together and all the controversy that had been spun up by the separation is now gone. He's a clown forever. Like he's the running joke in the biggest business move that's ever happened in the PGA. So to me, for all of those reasons, he's the biggest winner and the biggest loser in this situation.
Yeah, I totally agree. Man, I would give anything for them to just get Jay Monahan out the door. I know it's like a pipe dream to get him out the door and then just have Tiger and Phil just run golf.
Like, I could see Tiger doing it. I don't know if I could see Tiger and Phil.
I just have them team up. They're good enough friends where they could team up and come up with the right ideas to run golf properly throughout the world. We wouldn't have the players love both of those guys. Like they have good relationships with them. Everyone looks up to Tiger and Phil and all that stuff. So just have them run everything and everything will run smoothly. Just get this fraud out the door, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they need to go outside of the organization, outside the game of golf, and bring somebody in that understands how to run a company.
Yeah. As somebody that has binge watched Succession for the last 3 months and then watched the final season over the last 2 months, I think I make myself an expert in hostile takeovers and CEOs from outside companies. I texted a couple of my friends in another chat this morning. And I was like, man, I feel like I'm living like a real life like episode of Succession like this morning, like with all this talk about CEOs and hostile takeovers and all this stuff. But yeah, it definitely felt like that. So yeah, man, I agree with that. So yeah, I mean, could you see Tiger and Phil running the new professional golf league? What's going to happen to the TGL? The Tiger.
Oh, dude, that's gone. Like
the Monday night. You think that's gone?
I think that's totally gone. I
Really?
think. Yeah, I think.
I don't think so.
Well, the thing about it is like they initially they had this big push and then it just kind of died and like nobody ever talked about it again. So it's been in this weird limbo for like over 6 months where it was kind of backburnered. It felt, at least by the PGA Tour. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe that's where LIV Golf becomes the TGL. That's now LIV Golf, because all the crazy shit they were doing on in their events they can do on the TGL.
Yeah. I don't know. DP World Tour. Anything you want to talk about that? Just I think they're just going to be like kind of a developmental league for the PGA Tour.
They're along for the ride. Like, you know what I mean? Like the PGA Tour and LIV are driving this bus and they're in the back seat, going, oh, cool. Let me know when we get there. Like they you know what I mean? They were probably the most at risk, realistically, with LIV being in existence, of kind of evaporating. And so to me, they're probably like, whew, like, thank God this happened, because now we don't have to worry about any of that garbage anymore. Yeah, so I think they're happily like, we're just going to sit here and be quiet.
Yeah. Are you going to LACC next week?
I'm thinking about it, dude. I'm excited for the US Open. I've been saving my boy and one and done for this event all year. So I'm looking forward to deploying him. I think it's going to be a great event. Everybody who has any knowledge of the course, that's been there, that's walked the grounds, that's seen the overviews, that's talked to course designers, has said this is going to be the quintessential US Open of our lifetime, basically. So I think that's pretty amazing. I'd love to see it in person. I'd love to walk the grounds and to see what it looks like and to be there and experience it.
I think I'm going to go on Saturday with my wife and my son, just as a little like Father's Day kind of gift to myself, I guess. So if you end up going on Saturday, just let me know. Maybe we can meet up or whatever. I would love to see the golf course and see the pros and just hear all the buzz and talking about this merger at a major event. I think it'll be fun next week. But we do have a golf tournament this week.
53 minutes in, and we're finally going to talk about the Canadian Open.
We're not gonna talk like we usually do, tier by tier. I know we wanted to talk with the majority of this pod about the merger and everything like that, but we do have a golf tournament this week, Canadian Open. Do you have a course breakdown or anything like that, or?
Well, so here are the notes that I have, right, in kind of sourcing this out, right? So this course it's an amalgamation of 3 9s on the course. Jeff Feinberg, if you watch Mayo, like it's Feinberg's home course, right? So he's been instrumental in providing people with information on Twitter and through social media. So anyways, shout out Jeff Feinberg. Go look him up. Fantastic. He's on the grounds reporting stuff constantly. But so they're using kind of a reroute of 2 of the courses on the front, and then they're using the full, I think it's like the Knutson 9 on the back or something like that. Knutson 9, I think is what it's called. Right. And the front is supposed to be considerably harder than the back. All of that under consideration. The 3 designers who designed this course are the same 3 guys who designed Royal St. George, which is where they played the Canadian Open last year. So a lot of the same styles, bunkering, the movement of the course is going to look very, very familiar. It's a Parkland style course. It's fairly short. I want to say it's a little less than 7,200, a little over 7,200 yards, being a par 72. The comments that we've heard from players is that it's narrow, very small greens. The rough is high, but everybody seems to think this is going to finish somewhere in -15 to -20. So Rory went -19 last year at Royal St. George. So I think all of those narratives kind of play out where I think it's going to be. And I think because of course length, For me, I'm looking for guys who are really good with wedges in their hand, kind of 150 and in. I want a guy if everybody's going to be in that wedge range. To me, that's the key thing that's really going to matter is who can stick wedges and give themselves, birdie putts from inside of 10 feet. So I don't know if they'll be able to bomb and gouge it like they did Royal St. George because of the way everybody's talking about the rough, but I do think they're going to have no trouble navigating the course.
Yeah, I'm kind of hearing the same stuff as you. I think it is going to be, probably like between minus 17 and minus 20, kind of a birdie fest a little bit. But I was expecting to hear some withdrawals, especially today after the players meeting. But as of now, I haven't seen anybody withdraw. Yeah, I haven't seen anybody withdraw. All the odds have stayed the same. Unless we get some information tomorrow. Obviously, if you follow us, you know that we put out stuff on Discord every week on Wednesday. I will put out my article, not my article, but my write up that I usually do tomorrow with my bets and everything like that. So as long as we don't see any withdrawals, there are some guys I like in this event. Right off the top, I like Hatton. I see him at 13, 14 to 1 on some books, and he's been playing really good golf over the last few months. I think he's due to win an event pretty soon. I like his number. I don't mind it here. I think he's the second best player in the field. I think it's a good value for him. I like Tagala at 25 to 1. I think this is a kind of a good course for him. He could make a lot of birdies here. I know he tends to get a little wayward with the driver, but if he can get his driver in check, I don't mind him this week. And I mean, I think if Tommy Fleetwood wins this week, I think the entire world wins this week. So
yeah,
I'm going to bet Tommy. He's one of my favorite golfers on tour. I think everybody is betting him this week. I see him at 25 to 1 right now. I know there's some places you could probably still get him at 30 to 1. So those are probably my guys at the top: Hatton, Tagala, Tommy. I think I'm going to stay away from the Canadians. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, if you look historically here, the Canadians have not fared well in this tournament. Outside of Corey Connors top 10ing last year, like they just, for whatever reason, maybe
they get nervous.
Pressure.
They get nervous.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. But yeah. I mean, Connors was basically terrible until he finished 6th last year. So yeah, I'm probably going to avoid basically all the Canadians. So bets I've made, like you, I bet Fleetwood just because it feels very much like the Vic bet last week where it's like everyone's on it. The other guy I like just because I feel like there's some value. I mean, dude, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys in the book that I use that are under 20 to 1, which is ridiculous to me. But Shane Lowry at 20, 22, depending on where you can get him. Like I heard there were 25s earlier today. I did not jump on that, but I like Lowry at 20, Fleetwood at 22. Keith Mitchell, if the bomb and gouge narrative becomes a way to I guess overpower this course, I like Keith Mitchell at 45, 50 to 1. And then a little bit farther down the board, just a couple names that I circled. The only Canadian that I am looking at, and I've heard other people talk about him, is Nick Taylor.
Nick Taylor. I like Nick Taylor this week. I was hoping you'd say Nick Taylor.
Yeah, Nick Taylor. I like Nick Taylor. Eric Cole is another one that I'm looking at.
I like him too.
Yeah, and David Lipsky. Like Lipsky was just in the mix at Memorial here last week. He's been playing really good golf, and he's out there like over 100 to 1 in most places.
How mad were you going to be last week if Lipsky won and you didn't bet him?
Oh, dude, I would have lost my mind.
That is your boy.
I might have quit doing this show because I feel like I bet him every damn week just because his odds are so high. Yeah. And he, oh my God, dude, like I was beside myself watching this guy in the lead.
He was playing so good last week. Yeah, I like that.
Played great.
Yeah, I like the Lipsky call. A couple other names down the board that I like. I like Hubbard. He played well last week.
He broke Mike's heart on Sunday.
Yeah, he crumbled on Sunday. I think he shot like 82 or something on Sunday.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
But I think he could bounce back. He's hitting the ball great. I think this is a course that suits him well. I like Ben Martin. I see him at like 150 to 1. He think this is a course that sets up well for him.
Yep, been
I
playing very,
like,
very good golf.
yep, I like my boy Akshay Bhatia. I see him at like 100 to 1. He can make a lot of birdies. Sam Bennett is interesting to me a little bit. He made his professional debut last week. And he played well. He made the cut. He crumbled a little bit on the weekends, but the guy's a good golfer, man. He makes a lot of birdies. He makes some mistakes, but I like him this week. And another name that I've been hearing just because he's a Canadian and Pat Mayo's been talking him up is Aaron Cockrell at 200 to 1. He's a DP World Tour guy. He's been playing pretty great on the DP World Tour the last few months, so I don't mind that at 200 to 1. He's a Canadian, so he's obviously going to be in this event. So I like that. Any other bombs that you want to talk about?
No, I mean, I would say this because we're talking about a course that is not going to be super advantageous to be long on off the tee, and that we believe like the plurality of approaches are going to come from wedge distance. It's going to bring in a lot more guys. So to your point, like this is the type of tournament where you want to bet guys down the board who've been playing well, because these guys could be in contention. Guys like Justin Lower and Peter Malnati and, to your point, Ben Martin, like these guys are live here at this event. This is historically like Brandt Snedeker, who his, team RBC, like he was a perennial top 5 guy at this course. And, his MO was hit fairways and stick wedges. So I think all of these guys are live, even guys who we haven't seen in a while, like CT Pan. Like CT Pan, when you look at him statistically, he's very, very good from the wedge distances. The last time we saw him was at the Byron Nelson, where he finished in 4th place. He's played this event before and finished with a top 25. So, CT Pan with, again, buyer beware, because he's only got 8 rounds this year underneath him. Yeah. That's another guy that you can kind of fire a dart at. The other guy that was funny because he popped in my model a little bit is Charlie Hoffman. Like Hoffman hasn't been playing great, but I mean, he had a 2nd place finish in the Canadian Open a couple years ago. He's been objectively terrible. He still finished top 35 in this event last year, and he's still number 1 in this field from inside of 150 yards. Like, he put a wedge in his hand and he's sticking stuff. Obviously, he can't putt for shit, but
yeah,
hey, you get a hot putter. This is the kind of week we talk about all the time, where you just need a guy to get a hot putter and he'll win. Like, that's it. There's no real rhyme or reason other than he just has a good putting week and he wins. One name that I did want to throw out that some people have probably heard, but there's a kid making, I wouldn't say his professional debut, because I don't know if he's actually doing it as a professional, but it's Ludwig Aberg.
He's a professional. He's a pro now.
Yep. So he was the number 1 collegiate player for the amateur player in the world, but the number 1 complete collegiate player as well too for the last 2 years. And the dude is an absolute machine. Like he is an approach machine. He is a ball striking freak, and the guy is a very, very good putter as well. So, that's why when you see that name and you'll see like 50s and 60s next to him, that's why, like, this kid is like legit could win day 1. He's that kind of talent. So yeah. Ludwig Aberg, I think he's like 8,300 in DraftKings. And, I don't think you're going to see a lot of people using him because they don't know who he is. But I can't touch the number at 50 to 1 in your pro debut. But I do think that's a name that I wouldn't be surprised if he's playing well and in the mix on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, like everything you just said, I like it. He is making his pro debut this week. He's one of those guys that he's, like you said, he's a phenom. He's incredible. He's played in some PGA Tour events and he's played pretty well. He's made cuts over the last year. He's one of those guys you want to be early on. Because he may not be 8,300 for very long. He may very much be in the 9K, 10K range this time next year, possibly if he plays really well. So this is one of those situations where the earlier you're on him, the better, and hope that he does what he's meant to do. So Mike, please send please send that Keith Mitchell pick in the text thread so that we get that officially in there. So
Yeah, I think Mike was referring to the throw up in his mouth from his Hubbard deal. Like we were giving him so much crap because he selected Mark Hubbard as his one and done last week. And Hubbard almost came through for him until he absolutely choked on Sunday. But yeah, I mean, I could see Mark Hubbard winning this week. Like honestly, like that's the kind of event this is. Mark Hubbard's very good with wedges. He's obviously playing fantastic, coming in with unbelievable form. The other guy that I'll throw out that we didn't talk about, that I do think has a legitimate chance to win because he is rounding into form in terms of how he's closing out events and playing is Burns. Like Burns to me, if I could get Sam Burns north of 16-1, I would probably bet it. This feels like the kind of event that Sam Burns wins, and with the shitstorm that's going to be around Rory for the next 3 or 4 days, like I could see him mentally not being here, and I could see this being kind of, Fitz and Rose and Burns, kind of the guys in contention down the stretch. I can't bet it right now because it's like 12 to 14-1 in most places.
yeah,
But if that number creeps, I could see betting him. And then from a DraftKings perspective, I don't think anybody's going to play him because, to your point, I think everybody's going to play Rory and Hatton, and he's sandwiched between those two guys at 10-5. So I do like Sam Burns, kind of a pivot play as well on DFS this week.
okay. We will post our bets and our DraftKings plays on Discord tomorrow. Anything else you want to talk about before we call it a day? I wanted to get your take on before we go real quick, just a real quick minute on Rose Zhang from last week, winning her LPGA debut. She's a phenom, man. I was watching her last couple holes, and she won her first LPGA event as a pro without making a single birdie on Sunday, which is amazing. And even in 2 playoff holes, like she didn't make a birdie, and she still won the event. So one of the most decorated collegiate women's golfers that we've known. She's probably the most highly touted prospect coming out of Stanford since Tiger Woods. Just incredible. Like the way she handled herself down the stretch last week. I watched it after the Memorial. I watched like the last 5 holes on Golf Channel, and she was just amazing. And I'm just happy that she won.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that we're finding out with many of these young kids, whether it's Sam Bennett, Ludwig Aberg, or Rose Zhang, is these kids are ready to play, win, and compete now. Like they're ready to make that move.
Yep.
And so especially in women's professional golf, like the level of, how do I want to say this and not seem like just the difference between the best men's college player and the best PGA player is a much wider gap than the best women's college player and the best LPGA player. And that's not a knock at all. It's just that gap is wider because the men have been doing it at a much higher level at a much longer period of time. So as the women's game continues to grow and evolve, and it's been around a long time, it'll get better. But these young women that are coming out of college, dude, like they're ready to win and compete now. And Rose is, to your point, as good a golfer as we've seen coming out of college, men or women, in probably a decade.
Mm-hmm.
And, Ludwig, who we talked about, is probably in a similar, sphere of elitism, if that's a word, as she is. So hats off to her. I mean, I think it's fantastic. And I wouldn't be surprised if she wins 2 or 3 more times this year.
Yep. Totally agree. All right, man. That was a good conversation. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I think these were all things you and I had been feeling, so it's nice to get it off our chest. But we'll see where the world of professional golf goes over the next year here. I mean, there's, to steal your term, there's a non-zero chance that this thing never comes together and it blows up and nothing ever happens from it. But I think what'll probably end up happening is it'll go through and it'll take some time to figure out. And some of the things that LIV was doing, I hope that PGA incorporates coverage wise, showing more shots.
Yeah, absolutely.
making the events different and fun, bringing the team aspect in some form or fashion. So I think those are good things. And if we've learned anything from mergers over the years, whether it's the NBA and the ABA or the AFL and the NFL or whatever it is, like they take pieces from the piece that they're basically taking on to make the game better, the experience better for the fans, for the players, for everyone. So I think innovation, by and large, regardless of how it's done, the net benefit is always positive, and I'm hoping the net benefit of all of this and the merger between LIV, DP, and the PGA Tour is a good thing.
Totally agree. We'll be here next week to break down LACC and the US Open. And if we have any more news about this merger next week, we'll talk about it. But yeah, until then, enjoy the Canadian Open. I'm sure we're going to get a slew of news tomorrow. I think Rory has a press conference set up for tomorrow.
Yeah.
So we're going to get a slew of news tomorrow, and we'll be enjoying it, watching it unfold over the week. Enjoy the Canadian Open. And we'll be back next week to talk US Open.
Absolutely, man. Excited for the third major of the year. And it's in our backyard, man. I'm going to try and get up there and meet you on Saturday, but best of luck to you this week. We'll post our bets in the Discord, as well as your tidbits and your favorite plays for the week on Wednesday, Rick. So look forward to that. Join the Discord. It's free. It's easy. Click the link down in the description. Remember to subscribe to the Nickel City Mafia channel, and we will see you back here next week. Have a good night, man.
You too.